guys, I'm so stoked that you're here for this, because what's critical to all the work we're trying to do is that we have big corporations who really do have the resources to change the world and to fund the innovation, fund the research, and bring forth the stories that need to hit the media. They need to be, issues need to be destigmatized, awareness needs to be raised in order for us to all live healthier lives. And with women in particular, this is something that we're clearly passionate about at Flow Space, how little research funding, medical funding has been allocated to women's brains and bodies for centuries. And so we are very specific about the men who speak on our stage. As you may, I mean, Scott Galloway, that was a deviation from the norm, but we'll let him like come forth so we can see how the other half lives. But it's been, so only 5% of our speakers are men, which is not because we're anti anything. It's more because, you know, they gotta prove they can.
Better.
Yeah, we're not anti anything about you. We are really judicious about the policies, practices, and just in general interest in women's health of anyone who graces our little stage here. So thanks, you guys, for showing up. These are the people who are going to, I hope, bring us things like life-saving vaccines. I hope they help me with my perimenopause. Like, come on, I can list the issues. But anyway, so Drew.
Yes. Well, thank you for having
Yes.
me here. My wife's was of all the things I've been speaking at, she was really excited about this. And you know, Scott was talking about supporting a woman's trajectory, career trajectory. I think one of the things we can do as men, my wife is a chief HR officer of the Ball Corporation.
Wow.
And so people ask, like, why do you live in Boulder and commute to New York every week, which I do for Pfizer, and it's to support her career.
Thank you for that, dude. That does not happen a lot.
Yeah. Us as men need we need to fight for that. Yeah. So it's super important. And work
it is
for companies.
The drop-off.
Yeah.
It is the drop-off of 45% of women who start leaving the workforce at 50 and above, and retiring before their, you know, if they are in a heteronormative relationship, before their husbands, and it is just it's a foregone conclusion that that's where the retirement would happen, the stepping down, moving away from white collar, and that's why we, you know, sadly have so few women in top positions, and so that's awesome. That's like Coach Taylor. Do you guys watch Friday Night Lights when he's like, "All right, man, let's go, Tammy, wherever you want to go."
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm jumping right in on Pfizer because I know it's new. It's a newish gig for you. You started and came from. Tell us.
Yeah, it's funny. I was saying this a couple of weeks ago. Someone asked. They said, "You are the only person in the world that has worked for Chick-fil-A, who's on the far right, and Google, who's on the far left."
Wow.
And I worked for Coke, who I say is in the middle. And it's really been an interesting journey. I've worked for Disney as well, and I'm a junkie for marketing transformation. I think that brands have a responsibility. So everyone's like, why have you worked at all these brands from, you know, Chick-fil-A, Google, Coke, Disney? And I say this, I grew up as an immigrant kid. And
where were you coming from?
Astoria, New York.
Okay.
So I grew up in the city. I was born in London. My parents were immigrants. Actually left a country called Cyprus during a war-torn time, and my dad was a chef, and then we went to New York. They didn't speak English. And when you grow up as an immigrant kid, you want to matter, right? Oprah said this, we all want to know we matter. And for me, the way I felt like I could matter is to touch American iconic brands. And so
huge influence.
Yeah, and so I went into a career where I've touched, I think, 8 out of the top 20 brands.
Wow.
And so it's now I do it for different reasons, but it's been an interesting, like, I've seen so much.
That's a very cool ride, and a really rare set of experiences. Not only wildly different brands, but different categories of product. And so when you thinking now about where you are right now, but can you tell us a little bit more about some of the campaigns you've been running recently? You had the launch of a new campaign called Outdo yesterday, which I think is, and this movement, I don't know if it's new, but I've noticed it more, of Pfizer really getting behind messages that are about changing our thinking or celebrating certain things, not just a specific medical solution. So if you could tell us about that campaign.
Sure. Actually, one of the reasons I came to Pfizer was interviewing with Albert Bourla, CEO. And he said after COVID, Pfizer has become a household name, similar to Google, where I was at prior. And he said, we now have a different stage and a different platform and a different responsibility around the Pfizer brand. And so I came on board, and the executive team had a question, which is, okay, how do we really sharpen our true north and communicate that to the world, and to enlist people in the future direction of where we're going with science. And at the core of Pfizer, and I say this, there's sometimes a really negative term that's associated with pharmaceutical companies called big pharma.
Yeah.
I don't tend to think about big pharma, because Pfizer very much is focused on science and being a scientific company. And I think if you're involved in science, you have to be involved in culture to a certain degree, because science happens in and around us. Health is very personal. And we certainly saw that during COVID, being in the center of kind of the cultural wars around vaccines. And we came up with a sharper brand idea, still authentic to who Pfizer was, and we thought about how do we articulate this notion that the company is all about accelerating better.
Right.
Everything that the company does, whether it's developing a vaccine in record time, it's speeding up, moving faster to help make the world a better place through science. And the manifestation of that is this line we use called outdo yesterday. It's kind of our just do it. And as a marketer,
I like that.
You don't oftentimes, and we thought about this at Coke and Disney. At Disney particularly, we're like, what's our tagline? And sometimes you'd never have a tagline, right? It's just Disney. And at other times you can have a line, and for us, this notion of outdo yesterday felt so true to what the company is, and it's all of our constituents relate to it, because everyone just wants to do a little bit better today than they did yesterday. Doctors, when you sit with them and they have a patient, they say, I want my patient just to do a little bit better, even if they have an incurable disease. People want to do better regarding their health, and so we felt like that can be a rally cry to the science that we're bringing to life and to the world around healthcare, because ultimately that's what I want, that's what the company wants, is we want the world to be a little bit better in terms of their health.
And I think that better feels less stressful than best or cured or extreme sort of goal orientation of get to this point. Better is always going to be kind of qualitative in a nice way. I think that's very, very cool. Now, speed on pharmaceutical products, I find it really interesting how much we learned. And disclosure, my husband's a psychiatrist, and so I've watched the degree of...
now I'm in trouble.
No, you're not.
We're going to go deep into the psyche of marketers.
He's got everything in his repertoire. He can tell me exactly what Pfizer makes, and he prescribes it lots. But he's speaking later about psychedelics and intimacy, which is a huge mistake on my part to have let that happen. Yes. Don't know why.
I want to come back for that one.
Yeah, I didn't do the math. I stage people who work for me, intimacy. What the fuck was I thinking? But anyway.
Good. Now I know I can say fuck on stage.
Oh yeah, you can. Sorry, I can't.
We didn't clear that rule in the back.
Yeah, I know. It's a filter for our friends. But the speed issue, opportunity. I feel like you guys blew. In addition to, I think, blowing the negative connotation of big pharma and being more deep science, fast science, which is, I love the idea that I know trials are fundamental, and so there's no part of me that thinks don't try every angle or speed to market in an irresponsible way. But have you guys learned did this sharpen some acuity in moving quickly from identifying a component of a scientific solution to getting a product out?
Yeah. No, the way the company operated during COVID clearly was, how do you eliminate bureaucracy and problem solve? And in healthcare, we have a big industry it touches everyone's life, and it gets stuck in a lot of kind of like risk mitigation, right? And I think during COVID, it was like, we want the world to be free again. And we found a way to just kind of not take risk where it would hurt anyone, but just like, let's just like make meetings shorter so that we can make decisions faster. And let's speed up our internal processes so that we can move quickly. And I think that lesson, I think, should be applied now that we have things like AI that can radically change healthcare. And it's not about pharmaceuticals, but just how healthcare is delivered. The rate of which we can discover life-saving drugs and medications that can ultimately cure cancer one day or make cancer a chronic disease. I think about this with AIDS. If we had the technology and AI systems that we have today, how many lives would we have saved, right, if we had moved that way during like that health crisis? And so I think the one thing, we talked about this earlier this year internally, is like, we need almost an open AI around healthcare and data, because one of the benefits of AI will literally be speeding up drugs that will save the life of my 10-year-old son, my sister, and we can get there. And get there without taking risks, but just speeding up all the bureaucratic elements that slow us down to discovery, to taking drugs to market, to helping doctors diagnose a disease faster, whether it's cancer, or navigate issues like medical gaslighting. There's technology now to help doctors avoid bias, right? That to me is like the big picture. It's not just developing drugs, but improving how healthcare happens for every individual.
I'm interested in that, not only from a business perspective, but also from, again, living with and having loads of friends who are expert researchers and medical professionals who do get the bureaucracy, the degree to which they're bogged down, the things they can and can't say as part of a hospital, and the reluctance for many to embrace technology, because it sort of, in some cases, might make you feel, if your profession and your education did not include AI, it's like, is there going to be an AI doctor in a white coat who's telling you everything, what to do, and I'm out of here? I think that again, companies who are innovating and investing in the research are going to have a big role in changing the way the medical professionals can work.
100%. Actually, had breakfast with David Gernstein. Is Lindsay, your husband. He's a doctor at the Rush Medical System in Chicago, and I make it a point of like, we just need to talk to doctors more and understand where they are and how difficult it is to provide care. Right? I care about that as someone who cares about healthcare, right? And we were talking about, how do you deliver healthcare in a world where doctors now have to interface with a bunch of systems, and they didn't go into healthcare to sit in front of their computer. And so how do we just kind of like start making healthcare work for real people, whether it's a doctor, a nurse, or a patient? That ultimately, I think, is why I'm optimistic about AI, because I think we can make it take out a lot of burden in the system.
I like that, and I think maybe even have the incredible gift of having on our FlowSpace board 30 medical professionals, really innovative thinkers who are OBs or neuroscientists or pelvic health doctors, urologists, and they're teaching us all the time. And those who have joined our board tend to be very much step forward kinds of innovative thinkers. I see, hi Heidi Flagg, Dr. Heidi Flagg.
Dr. Heidi Flagg, hi, nice to meet you.
And they're like, how can I think, especially like once you've maybe been in the profession for like 30 years, you're like, how can I work with this radically changing environment so that I can do more? I feel like a lot of women I know become not activist, but they're like, I see the problems now. I want to do more. I have so much education, and meaning maybe my kids have left the home. I am ready to do more. Like, put me to work. So
we need women to help us change healthcare more than ever. One of my good friends, I talk to her often, is Valerie Montgomery Rice. She's the president of the Morehouse School of Medicine, Atlanta. You have to have her on your stage. She's a dynamo. She sits on the board of the BET network. And she always tells me, Drew, you got to keep it real in healthcare. And I think we need more people like Valerie, we need more activists, we need more women who will push us to a better place to get away from some of the stuff that slows us down. I used to talk about this a lot when I was at Alphabet and at Google. The next 2 generations are willing to share their healthcare data, right? Healthcare is an amazing, it's funny, coming from Disney to Google to Pfizer, healthcare is the most personal thing, right? And it is something that most governments control.
Right.
And you're like, it's fascinating. The government controls the thing that is most personal in my life, right?
Wow.
And the gold to allow people to have more agency in their healthcare, the gold is your data, my data, people's data.
100%.
And the more that people take control of their data and decide how they want to use it in healthcare, and if they want to use it to accelerate drug delivery and get reimbursed, like we need to have people get credit for their data, right? And if you do that in healthcare, you will change the relationship of how healthcare is delivered and how healthcare works for every individual in the world. And it all starts, I think, particularly with AI, with the data that you have in your pocket around your health. And we haven't figured out how to change that relationship and agency so that it serves you.
And what are the main barriers to that happening, to that wonderful world in which our data is accessible to those who can actually use it to provide solutions for us? Like, what's the big barrier?
Yeah,
Government, there's so many options. Barriers.
I find it interesting, right? The companies de-identify data, they get claims data from third parties. That's still your data, right?
Oh, yeah.
So if you go to CVS, I think we just have to start having conversations around, if I'm going to let you have my data around my prescription or my data around something that's in my health wallet, I think we have to start saying don't make me sign a bunch of documents that I don't understand around that data, like my chart or X, Y, and Z, and start with, I want to always have control over how it's used, and if it's going to be used by people further down the food chain, then you should reduce my healthcare costs. You should give me something for it.
I like this.
And I say this because
because then it's economically also interesting to,
and the analogy for me, and we can talk about it on the stage because no one talks about this, is, I'm a reformed marketer, right? I grew up in the early days pre-iPhone and then became a CMO that codes in Python. And all of the value creation and advertising, right? The Facebooks, the Metas, the Googles of the world, started with selling ads.
Oh, yeah.
And ads were
based...
based...
You're looking at me like I'm an ads...
No. But I say this...
I'll sell you some ads. You guys want to buy an ad?
Because the analogy is the whole thing of, are you willing to have an ad-free experience? And if you are, fine, pay $5. But if you don't want an ad-free experience, then all this data that's used to serve you an ad is giving you some sort of value because you have free information or free content. I think the same analogy has to be applied to healthcare, which is, okay, if you're going to have all this data to develop drugs or to manage my prescription, then what's my ad-free analogy?
That's very cool. And I think that turning it into an economic incentive and an economic exchange is, and you're right, I hadn't thought of it that way, that the advertising versus subscriber models, most consumers get it. We get it. Like, my kids get it. They're like, oh yeah, we're watching on my account, so now you're going to see some ads. And they understand that that's the consumer contract. And it's and is it worth it? Like, maybe if I really like something, I'm going to go for the subscription model. But I love that idea because it really would empower consumers.
And it'll change the world. I mean, I say this, the largest longitudinal health study, one of the biggest ones, is by the NIH, and it's called All of Us. And so these are people that sign up to say, track me through my health journey, and then take that information and use it for good, and the government uses it for good to develop drugs and identify life-saving medicine. If we had 20x that, and we had the whole world say, I'm going to give you my data, and you could track me, but this is what I want. I want easier health care. I want lower priced drugs. that's a crazy notion, but the conversation we need to have.
Oh, it's such a
because
cool idea.
if we had 20 of those studies,
Yeah.
like 20 of us, all of us, databases that allow us to understand disease, women's health,
Right.
like the things that are very specific to people.
Yeah, that where people have a passion
Yeah.
for it. Like our room,
Breast cancer.
Yeah, we have passions in our community
Yeah.
for certain things, and I believe that of the 70 million women we reach, that there are quite a few who'd be like, if you can help me solve two symptoms of perimenopause that cause me to be uncomfortable at work, I will. A, we're trying to normalize it, so I'll give you the data. I'll talk about it, but B, like I want that solution to exist for us, but also for the next
Yes.
generation. Breast cancer is a great example.
Exactly.
I mean, but I think maybe we can be useful in this, like going to the advocate groups, going to the ones
Yes.
who are raising their hand. We had the CEO of Susan G. Komen, Paula Schneider earlier, and they're doing a kind of one of those like everybody spit in a vial and let us use that data because we're using it to solve some of the issues that plague most of us. I have so many things to ask you, but then I'm also like, that says
Yeah, we're
0,
running out of
0,
time.
0.
So we went way off the reservation.
I can ask
We
you one
talked
more,
about crazy stuff.
But because I really appreciate that, we did you guys funded a medical gaslighting content series with us.
Yes.
That
Black Maternal Hub.
Yes, and you did
Yes.
Black Maternal Health, and
We're committed to the cause.
But I also love. I mean, you're choosing subject matter that desperately needs to be. Where we desperately need education. Like
Yes.
if you don't know you're being gaslit, you don't know what to do about it. If you don't know, as our speakers on stage before this discussed, like your likelihood of developing certain diseases, your likelihood of fatality in childbirth is X amount greater if you're Black, and then if you live in certain communities, and all this data that exists that's not. You don't know it, maybe.
Yes.
So how do you choose where to raise awareness? Like, how do you guys, you've done it with us with amazing subject matter, and
I think you have to do, like you said, you have to do it high and low. We talked during COVID, we had partnerships, I think, with 100 Black men of America, and you have to get into the barber shops if you want to talk about vaccines, and within certain, like South Atlanta, where I used to be a resident of. I think you have to do it at a grassroots level, and then you have to magnify it with the right parts of culture. Everyone thinks it's crazy, but culture can drive change, and when you connect to it the right way. And I think as a brand, you think about, how do I leverage these authentic grassroots efforts and then magnify it with the right partnerships and culture that give it energy and momentum. Obviously, we had a lot of people talking about us when we did our Travis Kelce
that was dope.
partnership. But I think you have to do high and low. You gotta be in the barbershops. You got to be in the local.
These rooms. I mean, this is a room of women
right?
who are sweating.
Yes,
a lot
these
of
rooms.
us sweating. We don't want to sneeze.
And my wife is sweating.
Right.
She is 50, and we
Not all
talked.
of
It's
you,
funny.
that's
We
right.
talked about this the other day. I'm
Right.
like, we put a new HVAC system, and she goes, "I am hot as hell." And I said, "I know, but I'm sorry." But I think we have to remove the stigma for people to talk about it, and to it's funny. I think about this all the time. People say social media is kind of like the toilet bowl. Well, I think you have to live in those channels because that's the community conversation. Right?
Yeah.
It's digital and it's the community conversation, and you have to engage in social channels, and you have to engage in local communities, and then you got to shine a light on it so that it breaks through all the noise. And so, and I think like Susan J. Komen's a great example of a grassroots effort that
really changed the
really
world.
changed the world, and then it got magnified with celebrities, because celebrities can use their power for good. I always say this: the only way we're going to change healthcare is you better find a way to start engaging the people that affect the airwaves.
Yeah, and we're lucky to have those people jump on with us because we're women's health, and they'll show up. The biggest in the world will show up when it's something that their mother suffered, that they suffered. And so
Taylor Swift will show up.
I'm wearing all of her bracelets. Just saying. Okay, so thank you, dude, so much.
Thank you. It was fun.
We really appreciate
enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.